curve moving into the 2 into 3 like Scarab does, but it could be powerful in that it can give you access to later game options, like you could discover a Grom, for instance, and that's obviously very, very powerful. The Cabal Courier, in my mind, seems like probably the next best of them, simply because the efficiency of what you're getting for the body. You don't really care that much about the body, but you're getting a relatively cheap discover effect from the Courier, as opposed to Lotus Agent, which is pretty expensive. It costs 5. It is kind of similar to an Ethereal Conjurer, though you don't necessarily get access to things which synergize with your deck quite as consistently as you do with Ethereal Conjurer. And in many cases, we even saw Ethereal Conjurer kind of phase out largely in favor of Azure Drake, even in decks that are looking for that kind of effect with a bunch of extra spells. So I don't expect any of these to see a ton of play. I do think, as I mentioned, the Informant is the best of them. Worth noting that these are especially powerful alongside Bran. We've seen a ton of that recently, or at least I've played a ton of that sort of thing recently with Netherspite Historian. And Bran obviously synergizes best with cheaper Discover things, so you can do either more of them in the same turn, or do the Bran plus the Discover effect, the Battlecry effect, on a lower total of mana. So of these, the Grime Street Informant I expect to see the most play. But it's also worth noting that any of these have some interesting implications if you do have things like duplicate type effects. Any minion that generates additional value can have synergy with cards like that, or with the pandas that return the cards to your hand. And again, generally cheaper ones are the best with those because they're the easiest to combo with other cards just from a mana perspective. And it's also interesting that these can potentially give you access to cards outside of the purview of what your class usually gets. Priest getting a fireball, or a hunter getting shield block, some kind of way to generate armor or something, can allow for some interesting dynamics in the way that games play out. And I expect that is more likely to be a thing that comes up in, say, Arena than Constructed necessarily, just because of the efficiency level of these particular cards isn't necessarily great. But overall, I love the idea of the gangs. I'm actually kind of sad to hear that it sounds like there's only going to be 9 of these cards. It looks like this cycle, one of the legendary minions, or the gang leader of each, and then an additional probably cycle going through them. Curious to see what they all turn out to be, and I kind of hope that we see more of this sort of thing in the future, because it does make, as I mentioned, deck building much more interesting when you have a lot of overlapping things you can try out doing. So speaking of gang leaders, let's jump into what is one of the most exciting cards in the set, which is Kazakis. This is another Reno style of card. Reno Jackson, of course, is still in Standard now. Important to recognize that the rotation for Standard doesn't take place until the first set released next year. So I've heard people saying, oh, you won't be able to play this with Reno. That's not true. Kazakis will be available in the same Standard format as Reno Jackson, at least for the foreseeable future, until the next expansion release early next year. So obviously, Kazakis will go into many decks that also have Reno Jackson, because pretty powerful card to have in your singleton deck. I'm curious to see if this ends up being kind of a theme that we see explored more in either the other card we have in the Cabal, or in the other classes that are in the Cabal, the Warlock, Mage, and Priest. Simply because the leader of this gang having a effect that cares about having no duplicate in your deck would seem to lead one to believe that this is a thing that these classes are going to do in this set. So I'm curious to see if we'll see more of this. But this card in particular, I think, is obviously super cool. And it clearly has the ability to do really, really powerful things. And the modularity of this card, the modality of this card, the ability to sort of build whatever you need at any given time is really, really effective, I think, in giving you a lot of options during a game. I think this will play very well in control-oriented decks. Obviously not something that's looking to go into aggressive decks. Certainly not a zoo card. Generally speaking, the singleton decks do tend to be more control-oriented anyway. But if you're playing a long game and you're in the late stages against control decks, you can make 10 mana cards that will potentially be extremely powerful. Amusingly, this card pairs pretty well with Cho'Gall. Though spending 10 mana and 10 life could be kind of scary, but if you do, have a Reno deck, you can Cho'Gall into your 10 mana spell from this, and then Reno the next turn, get huge tempo swings. Could be kind of cool. Who knows? We haven't seen Cho'Gall really make much of an impact yet, but with the ability to have something like the spells that can come off of Kazakus. There's, I think, something like 120, 130 combinations I heard. I don't know all of them just yet, so it'll be interesting to see what those end up being, but there are stuff like deal tons of damage to minions, summon big minions, drawing cards, resurrecting minions. There's a lot of things that can be very powerful in lots of situations. Though it is worth noting that because it's a discover effect for each stage of the Kazakus spell, you discover either 1, 5, or 10 cost, then ability number 1, ability number 2. And there are enough options for the abilities that you're not guaranteed to get any particular one. So you can't just play your Kazakus and then be guaranteed to be able to do something like clear the board with the spell that you get the following turn. So important to note there, certainly. But I'm very excited to play decks with Kazakus, and I think that he's going to be a centerpiece of a lot of really cool and really interesting control decks moving forward in the expansion. Continuing on the theme of cards I'm excited about, let's look at the Priest cards. We'll start with the ones that I'm obviously very excited about, which are the Dragon Priest cards. So, Draconic Operative. This card is nuts. I've played a ton of Dragon Priest. I actually played Dragon Priest primarily in my only Priest Road to Legend last month. And Dragonfire Operative is kind of the sort of thing that deck really wants and needs. The deck needs a certain density of dragons, of course, because you need to be able to activate your synergies. And one of the dragons that you kind of find yourself forced to play is Azure Drake. And Azure Drake's like one of the most played cards in all of Hearthstone. It goes into tons of different decks. Part of the reason that's the case is because there's a lot of elements of it that are powerful. The fact that you can hard to play it, the fact that you get spell damage when it's on the field. But Priest doesn't really, Dragon Priest specifically, doesn't necessarily make great use out of those. For one, you don't really have much use for spell damage. At most, you tend to maybe have Holy Nova in your deck. And the Mondo combo of Azure Drake plus Holy Nova costs 10 mana, and that's pretty horrible. That's pretty inefficient to be able to actually power up your one damaging spell. You need to have the max mana crystals you can have in the game. And the card draw aspect is obviously pretty powerful, but you're sacrificing a lot to get those things which you don't care as much about. You actually, particularly as a priest, with the hero power of Heal 2, would love to have a larger, more stable body. And the 4/4 body of Azure Drake is not really something that competes very well on the board. Draconic Operative, though, 5/6, really outclasses pretty much everything at the 5-drop slot. And it's a dragon, and it has an upside of discovering a card from your opponent's deck. And now that, in many cases, when you're playing a Dragon Priest deck, can actually be better than drawing a card. For one, you can get access to effects that you don't necessarily have access to, like efficient removal for certain things, depending on what your opponent's playing. It's way better than the random effect of getting a card from Shifting Shade, which is kind of funny because Shifting Shade is an understated 4-drop with a Death Rattle. This is an overstated 5-drop with a Battle Cry. So it kind of goes to show how undercurved Shifting Shade is in some ways. Obviously, Shifting Shade works with N'Zoth, which can generate tons of resources in a long game. But it also sort of just shows how powerful Draconic Operative is in comparison. And the Draconic Operative can give you, those additional cards without the risk of fatiguing you. And Dragon Priest is interesting because it is a deck that can win the game via getting significant board presence and just, killing your opponent, but sometimes can just win the game via attrition and sometimes even via fatigue. It can definitely be a factor against some decks like, say, Control Warrior. And the fact that you're discovering to gain card advantage rather than drawing cards deeper into your deck is extremely powerful in terms of ensuring that you are not just going to draw through your deck and get fatigued. One of the things that's kind of problematic for Priest getting card advantage in general, you're either reliant on the random effects from Thoughtsteal, or you're reliant on conditional card draw like Northshire Cleric, which can either lead you to not actually be able to draw the cards because the cards are unable to be around when you are able to heal minions, or you just can burn through your deck because you have cards dedicated to drawing cards, Empowered Shield, and etc., etc. But Discovering prevents that fatigue possibility. So, super powerful card, and is really going to help Dragon Priest have a resurgence, I think. It's already a pretty powerful deck to begin with that I think people are underrating at this time. It's going to get a lot more powerful tools. Another one of those tools is Dragon Fire Potion. Now, in some alternate timeline, this is like the kind of card that I would get to preview because it's, two things that I absolutely love. It's a Priest card, it's a Dragon card, it's, a mass removal effect that I think Priest really needs. It's kind of like a Light Bomb, but not quite as powerful against really big minions. Obviously, this isn't going to be good at clearing out boards of Arcane Giants like Light Bomb might be able to do. But it is way better at killing Stealth Auctioneers or boards full of Stranglethorn Tigers that have been copied by Moonblade Warden, while preserving your own dragons on board. It is kind of unfortunate that the natural predator of priests, the Azure Drake or the Twilight Drake, are not able to be killed by this if you are up against an opponent who's using those. And Azure Drake is one of the most commonly played minions around, but there's just such upside from this. You don't have to play terrible cards like Holy Nova that are really bad in a lot of matchups when your opponents don't have lots of small minions. You can just totally cut that card from your deck. You can play this and, help incrementally kill those Arcane Giants, which Holy Nova basically doesn't do. But it is important to note, too, that even when you're playing Dragon Priest, you have a lot of non-dragon minions in your deck. You tend to have the Blackwing Corruptors, Blackwing Technicians, Bran, things like that, and you don't necessarily just one-sided board clear your opponent, but in the right circumstances, say you have some Dragonid Operatives in play, you can just blow up your opponent's stuff and basically flame strike them for just 6 mana, and that's kind of outrageous. So definitely going to see a lot of Dragon Priest on the ladder, and many of them will be played by me. So big card that will certainly have an impact. Also, just potentially in Control Priest, you can play a controlling Priest deck where this is kind of like your Light Bomb. And not necessarily have to play a bunch of weak sweepers. You can play, say, your Excavated Evils or Holy Novas, and then play this, which gives you so many more tools that are good at clearing off things that the smaller removal can't. You potentially don't even need to play the Akanai Circle combo, which many people sort of feel like they had to play in so many situations with Priest just because you couldn't deal with a medium-sized board after Light Bomb was gone. So definitely a very important card for Priest, which I do think we'll see a lot more in the future. So more Priest cards. Moving along, we have the Cabal Talon Priest, and it's kind of reminiscent of Dark Cultist, 3/4/4/3, that has an ability that can give a minion +3 health. It's not quite the same, of course. I've seen people saying, "Oh, this is lame. It's just a worse or better Dark Cultist." It's neither. It's obviously very, very similar to Dark Cultist, and the ability I think is actually very important on this in terms of making Priest able to do what Priest wants to do, which is actually have a minion in play that you can use your healing on. And the Cabal Talon Priest is obviously very powerful if you are able to curve out and follow that up with a Talon Priest. There aren't very many early drops that you necessarily are going to be able to play in a Priest deck that you'll play turn 1 or 2 into Cabal Talon Priest, at least that are popular right now. Lots of those minions are challenged too easily, like Northshire Cleric, for instance. It used to be great when there were a bunch of 2/1s around, but now that there are 1/3s and 3/4s for 1 and 2 mana, it's a lot harder to actually have any effective use of the Cleric and ensure that it can survive if you do play in the early turns. Talon Priest can help that, but you're not really necessarily gonna get a ton of value out of your Cleric that you play into your opponent coining out a Tunnel Trog, and then you Talon Priest it. You're able to get some reasonable board presence there sometimes, but it's not the dream. But what is the dream is having any kind of board presence, say Wormrust Agent or a Twilight Whelp that you can buff with this, and actually actively be able to pressure your opponent's board and use your hero power to pump your minions up. Kind of like a Velen's Chosen that doesn't give attack. That's one of the cards that was really crucial to a lot of Priest decks for a long time, was Velen's Chosen, the ability to actually ensure that your cheap minions remained relevant going into the middle and late stages of the game. Talon Priest doesn't allow you to do it in quite the same way because you can't just eat their minion on curve or up curve even. But it can ensure that your opponent isn't able to just easily get trades and allow them to basically circumvent your ability to use your hero power on your minions just by trading every stage of the game. So definitely a really powerful minion. As to exactly where it fits, does this outclass the Blackwing Technician? Probably not, in my mind, in Dragon Priest, because you don't necessarily always have an early play that you're able to get the boost on, and having the 3/5 is really relevant in a number of spots against, say, True Silver Champion, or against just incremental damage from a Tunnel Trog, Totem Golem, or Totem Golem, Scare Claws. The 5th point of health is a really big deal. So it'll be interesting to see where this does find a home, and I do think that it will go a long way to making tempo board-centric priest decks more viable. All right, next we have Pint-Sized Potion. This is an interesting card that kind of fills the hole that Shrinkmeister left. Priest has had a bunch of cards that are good against minions of a certain attack, mostly certain attack or less. There's obviously Shadow or Death that cares about certain attack or higher, but cards like Shadow and Horror, Cabal Shadow Priest, Shadow Pain, these are all cards that care about weak minions, and with the departure of Shrinkmeister from standard with Goblin vs. Gnomes, you didn't really have any way to take advantage of a lot of things. You saw those cards largely sort of fall by the wayside, with the exception, of course, of Shadow Pain, which is just powerful against Totem Golems, so it's been all along. But Pint-Sized Potion can allow you to utilize a lot of those cards much more effectively. The fact that it's -3 also significantly increases the range that you can hit with, say, Cabal Shadow Priest, and be able to Pint-Sized Potion Cabal Shadow Priest for cheaper mana than you could previously use the Shrinkmeister plus Cabal. It's actually also a really big deal. Like, you can very easily Pint-Sized Potion, then follow your opponent's, say, thing from below, and that's a huge tempo swing. And it'll be interesting to see if this causes people to build decks that are using a lot of those low attack, specific attacking cards, like Shadow Horror even. The Pint-Sized Potion plus Shadow Horror does kind of offer the ability to clear almost any board. Everything that your opponent has that has 5 or less attack will end up dying, and that's a huge one-sided swing. It does obviously take 2 cards, but there's so many other things you could potentially combine Pint-Sized Potion with in order for it to be effective, that it's not like you're just playing this strict combination of cards in order to get that effect. So certainly a card that is interesting to try and build around, and powers up a lot of things that Priest currently has that have been sort of lacking in ways to synergize with. So excited to try and build that with this. Next up we have Potion of Madness. This is another of the cards that care about low attack. This one is obviously basically Shadow Madness, but it's Shadow Madness that hits something a little bit smaller and does so for a way lower cost. And this card is kind of insane. Shadow Madness you very often would just be using on 2 attack minions anyway, and just primarily using it to 2-for-1 your opponent by stealing their small minion, trading into their other small minion. And Potion of Madness, you can do that for just 1 mana, so you don't have to wait until later on for these like big tempo swings. Not only that, but Potion of Madness costing 1 is very relevant because while Pyromancer is such a popular card and powerful card in a lot of priest decks, because of healing, because of power and shield, so the more cheap spells, and particularly cheap interactive spells, you're able to include in a priest deck that can take advantage of Wild Pyromancer, kind of the better. So it is worth noting that Potion of Madness is more powerful but still more situational than, say, just Holy Smite. Holy Smite is one-cost thing that can pretty consistently kill a cheap opposing minion, but doesn't have the super upside of possibly being able to 2-for-1 your opponent or get a lot of additional value. Potion of Madness is particularly strong right now against Hunter decks if they're using Kindly Grandmother, kind of the Shadow Madness on your Haunted Creeper sort of thing that was very, very powerful in the past. Has an even more swingy effect with Potion of Madness for just 1 mana on a Kindly Grandmother. If you're able to even just trade that off, not even trade it, even if you're just attacking your opponent's minion and just stealing their, killing their thing, getting a 3/2 for 1 mana, that's pretty powerful. So it'll be interesting to see how aggressive decks look and if Potion of Madness does have a home. Because, for instance, against, say, Tempo Mage, Potion of Madness is really weak because most of their deck consists of 3/2s. You can potentially Potion of Madness, say, Flame Waker, but Potion on a Babbling Book, Potion usually on a Mana Worm, not necessarily going to get a great thing to attack into it when it is only at 2 or less power. But it is also potentially very effective against Bloodmage Falnos, which is a super popular card, and again does combine with the pint-sized potion that we were talking about before, if we're looking to kind of go in on that style of effect. So definitely a very interesting card, definitely a card that gives Priest a lot of power against cheap aggressive minions if they're looking for it. We don't know, at least right now in the metagame, if this is a card that you would play, simply because there aren't that many great targets for it in a lot of aggressive decks. Obviously, though, very, very good against the Imp Gang boss, all those sort of things in Zoo as well. If those are the decks that are very popular, this could be a very good card, but otherwise, it could be tough to find home. I guess now I'll talk about kind of the honorary Priest card, the Fel Orc Soul Fiend. This is an interesting card that's kind of reminiscent, of course, of Injured Blade Master. It's a 3-drop that damages itself, and it does so, though, in a way that is better for a lot of what Priest wants to do than Injured Blade Master. The problem with Injured Blade Master in a lot of situations is that it will just trade down because it has such low health the turn that you play it. You play your Blade Master, and unless you are able to heal it immediately with something like Circle of Healing, your opponent can trade, say, a 2-drop into it or kill it with Fiery War Axe or Spirit Claws, and you've lost a lot of tempo pretty much immediately. But with Fel Orc Soul Fiend, it damages itself periodically, damages itself over time, so you can kind of think of this as a tempo investment of your mana now that you have to continue to invest your mana later in to make good on. So if you think about it, this is essentially a 3/5 minion in terms of what your opponent has to do to get rid of it going into your turn. So if your opponent doesn't deal 5 damage to it on their turn, it's still alive in your turn because it won't take damage. It'll be 3/7, take 2, etc. So if you're able to continue to invest mana in it later, you get a significant board presence now, which is very valuable to a Priest deck that's looking to wrest control of the early board in a game against an aggressive deck, or even kind of a mid-range deck like, say, mid-range Shaman. Having a minion that's difficult for them to kill easily with, say, Lightning Bolt or Spirit Claws can be very, very powerful, even if you do have to continue to invest mana in it over turns. It's also worth noting that this is a good way to trigger things that care about healing. One thing that you can kind of have a problem with in a Priest deck is you actually need to have your things damaged in order to get your heal triggers, like, say, with Northshire Cleric. Sometimes you just sit with Northshire Cleric in your hand and have nothing to heal with it, so it's kind of rotting. And Fel Orc Soul Fiend is kind of another Injured Blade Master in that sense as well, because it can give you effectively an enabler for your heal triggers by damaging itself. So I think this is actually a pretty powerful card. It's obviously not a Priest card, but it kind of feels like it might as well be a Priest card because you do need to be able to heal it to take advantage of it in any significant sense. But I think that if you can, this can be very, very powerful. And I do think that this can potentially give Priest decks even more options for those early turns if they do care about that healing effect.
We need to take this enemy down.
I believe that keep was yours. You have lost a keep.
Now that we have finished up with Priest, of course, my favorite class, I'm just going to sort of go through the other cards in, I guess, alphabetical order. How about that? So, they're Auction Mastered Vireo. This is kind of an interesting card, doesn't have an obvious use when you initially read it. It's like, okay, you can use your hero power multiple times, but you have to do something or to use your hero power multiple times. You have to be able to cast your spells and want to use your hero power a lot. What's going on with that? Well, for one, you don't have to necessarily do too much with it because it's a 3/4 for 3, which is pretty decent stat-wise to begin with. Two, there are two things that jump out at me when I think about using my hero power multiple times. Number one is Inspire. Obviously, lots of powerful things with Inspire if you're able to use them in turn. Something like Kodo Rider, Professor Peltris, even Tournament Medic. I played the essentially an Inspire deck for a long time. That's very, very powerful. I did use just Garrison Commander for a while, and it's not a card you necessarily want to have in your control decks because it doesn't really contest the board very well, but an Auction Master Beardo can often replicate that and give you additional value with those Inspire cards. Number 2, as far as use is concerned, for multiple hero powers. And the other thing that deck was built around, which is Shadow Form. I was, a huge fan of playing Shadow Priest, and particularly the Reno Shadow Priest deck that I messed around with for a long time prior to the release of the standard format. And being able to hero power multiple times is obviously much more powerful when your hero power is super good. And that's exactly what Shadow Form offers. And often, the Shadow Form deck would have, at least into the modern version I envision it, the desire to have significant number of spells to power up your additional healing stuff, like, say, Priest of the Feast, which is another new inclusion into that strategy that didn't exist back in the day, that you don't necessarily have to just rely on Reno Jackson for your big league heal. It also turns out Priest is in the Cabal and could potentially use Kazakus in all of this, so you can find some additional flexibility with the spell that you get from Kazakus. Maybe you can get a cheap one to use with Beardo if you need multiple hero power activations. The uses go on. So this is, obviously a very niche kind of exploration. What do I do with this type of card? But it's definitely a card that I'm looking at experimenting with, obviously in those two ways, with Inspire, with Shadow Form, and quite likely with both. So we may see the return of Reno Shadow Priest in the near future. Next we have kind of a simple card, Big Time Racketeer. This is a card that obviously cares about battlecry type stuff, works very well with Brand. Bronzebeard is very good against Mirror Entity, allows you to have just kind of a way to play with the battlecry effect and generating the minion straight up from the battlecry rather than the summon. Obviously makes Moonblade Portal have a potential really bad outcome, but overall just a card that probably won't have many significant constructive implications. A card that may have significant implications though is Counterfeit Coin. This is a interesting card, even that it's a card that Blizzard felt like it was okay to print. This is obviously half an Innervate, which, Innervate's great, so how good is half an Innervate? Probably pretty good. But Rogue is a class that cares a lot about both the ability to play multiple cards in turn, thanks to combo, as well as about spells, thanks to the use of Gadgetzan Auctioneer in Rogue. Lots of ways to take advantage of sort of every part of this. They really do love getting their coins on Tomb Pillager, huge part of that as well. As to whether this is a card that will really find a home in these competitive decks, it's tough to say. I'm certainly no Mirka Rogue expert, but my sort of experience watching these decks and commenting on people playing these decks and just seeing the lists, it feels like there's not necessarily room to just take out cards to put in these counterfeit coins very easily. It's very easy to just totally have air at some points with these decks. You already have preparation. You already have things that have to enable other things in order to do anything. There's a lot of low impact cards that you have when you're building a deck around these cheap spells in order to kind of go off with Auctioneer. And Counterfeit Coin, while it can kind of make your nut draws better, make your best draws able to just keep going really, really quickly, but it does make the possibility that you have draws that just peter out and don't have any gas because you just draw into really low impact cards that much more likely. So it'll be interesting to see where this card sort of lands. Is it super good and played a lot? Is it just a card that seems like it ought to be great because Anti-Mana Acceleration pretty much is? Not sure, but I'm certainly interested to see people experiment with it. Probably not one I'll be trying out too much. Not really in my wheelhouse, but I'm sure it'll see some play from these Miracle Rogue experts out there. And another card that seems like it is more cool than good is Finja. I love that this is, just the Murloc Ninja here, but a couple of problems with this card. It's a 5-cost 2/4, just straight up. It's pretty weak. Obviously it has stealth, so it's pretty much guaranteed to get a chance to attack. The problem is that its ability requires you to attack and kill a minion. So there's going to be a lot of matchups, or at least a lot of game states, where it's very difficult for you to get significant value with Finja, because say your opponent's playing Control. You have a 5-cost 2/4 in your deck, and your opponent is just going to have very little, if anything, you're ever going to be able to attack and kill in their deck. Against Control Priest, against pretty much any rogue deck, it's very unlikely your opponent is going to just walk something into you being able to attack it and kill it. It could be valuable against, you know, decks that do have significant small minions in play, whether they're Shaman with their totems, or Paladin with recruits, or anything like that. In those instances, when it does get a chance to trigger, it seems very powerful. You know, every time it attacks, you get 2 Murlocs from your deck. That can be super strong, but it seems like it's just wildly inconsistent, not only in terms of how likely it is to come up in a given game, but how likely it's even to come up in a particular matchup. It's very likely that you just run into people who won't have any good targets for you to kill, and hard to build a deck around a card. Next up, we have Friendly Bartender. So this is kind of a you know, basic, straightforward card. Just 2 for 2, deal 1 and each of your turns. Don't really see this as being a card that sees a lot of play. If you want healing effects, you generally want healing effects that are going to do a lot of healing, and usually in a big burst, because mostly you're trying to avoid being burst down rather than just sort of plinked down one at a time. Generally, control decks aren't going to have a lot of room to play either, simply because they're so vulnerable to getting killed by Graxes and things like that. So, not really a card that I expect to see a lot of play, but you know, maybe should look at some decks. This is a card that I'm kind of excited about. I think it's a neat card as a thought experiment, at least. It is Getaway Kodo. This is obviously a card kind of reminiscent of Redemption. You know, when your minion dies, you get a chance to reuse it. But in the case of Getaway Kodo, it's kind of like half a duplicate. Obviously, half a duplicate, then it gives you 1 copy of the minion. But significantly, it is a card that allows you to reuse battle cry effects. Like, for instance, Getaway Kodo in, let's say, Reno Paladin. You Getaway Kodo, play your Reno. If what kills your Reno? Well, you have another Reno to work with. And that's pretty great. You know, there's a lot of effects that are battle cries that you'd love to be able to use multiple times in a game, but can't necessarily find a great window to do or have an ability to do because, well, you can only play 1 copy of them, or you know, it's difficult to find opportunities to reuse them. But you know, this isn't just good with Battlecry. This is good with any minion that is particularly high impact in the matchup. Like, say, you know, you're playing against a deck like Freeze Mage, and you have a Ragnaros, and you know, you're able to get away Kodo and have only Ragnaros as your minions. And it's like, okay, well, they have to kill your Ragnaros. It's like, all right, well, now I have a Ragnaros again. Super powerful. Obviously works very well with Tyrion too. Any minion that is high impact enough that you can afford to spend the mana to replay it in addition to the mana from Getaway Kodo is just very, very powerful. So I think this is a really interesting card. It's obviously not the sort of tempo style play that Redemption is in a lot of instances. Obviously, you'd rather Redemption Tyrion than Getaway Kodo Tyrion because, hey, you get the Divine Shield and Ashbringer all, you know, prepackaged for just 0 additional mana once you've invested the Redemption already, whereas you have to actually pay it again for the Getaway Kodo, but more flexibility, of course, with actually getting those Battle Cry effects with this card. So definitely interesting to see if this finds a home. It creates some unique possibilities, and I'm excited about them. All right, Grook Fu Master, 3/5 win, 3/5. Meh. It's basically a slightly cheaper, slightly weaker Wind Fury Harpy. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Next up, we have I Know a Guy. I think this is just a funny card. It's like, you know, you just got to call